Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world, from border to border, coast to coast, and to all that ships at sea. I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning into the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. I'm really pleased today. My guest is Samantha Taylor. She's the ONC Testing and Certification Director at Leidos. Leidos is a authorized testing and certification body authorized by the ONC, and they perform testing and certification for health information technologies. Samantha, thanks for joining the Tate Chronicles.
Thank you today, Jim. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
We'll get in kind of some of the details of some of the things I'm interested in terms of what we can look forward to maybe in 2024 and some maybe new challenges for developers. But first, I know Leidos is relatively one of the newer players in the ONC testing and certification body process. And so tell me a little bit about Leidos and getting involved in this and the experience of the folks that you've brought in to kind of populate the Leidos team for certification and testing.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, we are relatively new to the ONC testing and certification space. We've been authorized since 2021, so we've been around for about a year. However, our team is pretty diverse with our wide range of healthcare and IT background. I have the privilege of overseeing both the testing side and the certification side, and I bring a military background, which helps complement my experience in interoperability and software development that I had prior to getting into the ONC space. And I think this gives me a strong understanding of our developers' perspective and an appreciation for really well-defined processes. Some other things about our team, our team has this very diverse background. Georgia, who works on my team, she and I both have prior experience with ATLs and ACBs. And so we use this experience to shape our processes. Georgia, she serves as our proctor, and she has about 7 years of ONC experience. So she provides our developers with a really invaluable resource for understanding the testing process in a very relatable way, because she's been doing this for a long time. And prior to that, she was in the clinical areas. So she's kind of from a software perspective, that is. So she understands both sides of that world very much like I do. And then our ACB manager, her name's Christina, and she has a background in health informatics, and she brings a very unique perspective with her experience in EHR training, optimization, as well as some of the quality payment program initiatives. So this has really helped us as we've streamlined our processes to make sure that we're really focusing on how we do ONC testing and certification and kind of do it a little bit different. So we've really taken a step back, even though we have experience in the ONC process from previous lives. We really looked at what is the ONC requiring us to do? What is our accreditation through NAVLAP and ANSI requiring us to do? So we've really streamlined all of that. And so we continually learn from our experiences, and we do that so that we can ensure that we're remaining agile and flexible, especially with the ONC program, how those program always is consistently changing, so that we can meet our clients' needs in a timely manner.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Samantha, is the fact that as a testing and certification body, you have a really unique view because you see the health information technology developers and vendors bringing their applications and workflows to you for testing and certification. So probably better than anyone, as a testing certification body, you can see some of the real challenges that kind of happen with regularity across the board for vendors. And so what are some of these challenges? Are they in understanding the rules as to what functionality they need, or the challenges around documentation? Where do you see people having, difficulty?
Yeah, I would say one of the main challenges we see is its distinction between the ONC and CMS. So while both of them fall under human health or health and human services, they're very separate divisions, and they have their own final rules that each one of them are regulated by. So one of the most particular challenges that comes from that understanding is the requirements for CMS quality payment program initiatives, which then utilize the certification from ONC's perspective as part of their requirements for eligibility for these different incentive payment programs. So what that really means is we have developers or vendors come to us and they want to become certified, and their motivator is the CMS incentive payment programs. And because CMS defines what those requirements are differently across each of their different programs, the scope changes for each of those different programs. So sometimes they'll come to us expecting us to understand what those requirements are. However, we're just accredited and authorized to discuss the ONC portion of the program, not the CMS portion of the program, which can make it challenging for our developers to gather the necessary testing and certification scoping information before they even get to the testing side. So that is one area we've definitely seen a lot of confusion and struggle, and we do our best, to point them to the right resources from a CMS perspective. So that is definitely a difficult thing since we're not authorized to talk about that side of the house.
Well, and so, mentioned challenges around functionality. Obviously, there's also challenges or just confusion around documentation. And so, to me, what I've experienced in terms of documentation is I believe it's G3, the safety enhanced design, report, document, file, whatever you want to call it. And unless the first time somebody from a vendor encounters that requirement, they think, well, it sounds like I need to build a pyramid, but I don't know how high the pyramid needs to be built out of. Does it need to be built out of steel or wood or sand or and so some documentation requirements are relatively simple. The safety enhanced design requirement to me is a heavy lift, and the first time a vendor goes through that process, it seems almost a shock to them to even understand how they need to accomplish it.
I would agree, and it's interesting that you actually brought that up, Jim, because that's something that me and my team have been working through. So obviously, when people come to us and they want to do G3, Safety Enhanced Design with us, one of the things that we do here at Leidos is we do some prep calls with our teams or our developers so that they understand what the requirements look like. So we kind of break down to them, this is a two-part. It's not just one. There's the data as well as the narrative report. So you have to, you have to interview people and you have to gather all this information around your system. One of the things that we have noticed is what is that baseline of information that has to be gathered. So we actually have a project in-house that we're working on to really well define what is the minimum requirement for this criteria as it relates to the other criteria within their scope, so that we can then turn around and educate our clients on the front end before they even get to the point of gathering this information and gathering this documentation for us. So yeah, definitely I agree with you 100%. Safety enhanced design is one of those challenges, and we are trying to help our developers navigate that in a more effective and timely way, because this program is complex and there is a lot of different aspects to it, and developers have a lot on their plates and they have a lot of different priorities. So we really want to partner with them to make sure they understand the requirements and try to make this process as simplistic and streamlined as that we possibly can.
And so the documentation around that safety enhanced design just takes place once, and of course that has to be successfully completed in terms of it accepted submitted documentation to get the certification awarded. But there's some documentation that's required on an annual basis as a conditions and maintenance of certification. I'm talking about real world testing. And I think real world testing maybe came up out of the swamp about 2 years ago. And it's not just a once and done thing. It's an ongoing process, annual process. Do you see, I may be oversimplified it here, Samantha, but it seems to me real world testing is just an attempt on the government's part to gather information, not only to see if particular types of health data or work processes of generating transmission of care documents, or how many prescriptions are electronic or whatever. They're just gathering information to see how much this functionality is actually being used. There's no penalties around it whatsoever, but they're gathering that type of data.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. And I think they do that similarly with, D12 and D13 as well, the attestation criteria for multi-factor authentication. And the other one, I think that's just like a way for the ONC to gather data about these different aspects of the EHRs, including the real world testing. And I mean, I would believe that the ONC uses that to help inform future rulemaking. And I would think that they're looking at what are they be doing from a real world testing, as well as the biannual attestation questions that they ask, and seeing how they can frame things for the future is really what I think that they might be doing with that data. Of course, real world testing, both the planning and the results aspect of it, that's a new part of certification for developers, and it's taken them a little bit of time to get used to it. But I think they see the value in that, and it can help set developers apart. How robust or how much effort that a developer puts into their real world testing and their plans. It can be a real nice marketing tool for them. So I think there's a lot of value, and it's used in a lot of different ways.
And the first time a vendor or someone who's given a task to generate that real world testing plan, and then to actually accomplish the next year the real world testing report based on the plan from the year before. The first time, it's a pretty steep learning curve, but after they've done it a year or two, I think it is just much easier to understand. So hopefully most vendors can maintain some consistency in who's responsible for creating that documentation, because there's a learning curve in it the first time through.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. The first time was a little bit rough, but I do think it's a really repeatable process. And just as things kind of change within their systems, or they change the scope of their certification, then they, have to add in an additional criteria. So, the first time through, most people didn't have G10 within their scope, and now they do. So they're now having to include that within their scope. So it's just an additional aspect that they have to take into consideration. But I definitely think it's repeatable. And once they get through that first phase, it's not too bad. But there's great resources on hit.gov with the templates there that the ONC has provided, and then of course the ACBs are always there to answer questions. Of course, we're not doing a technical review, so we can't get too far in the weeds. But from a compliance and completeness check, we're definitely there to help them to make sure that they're including what they need to from that perspective.
Before I go to my next question, let me say to anybody who's joined this conversation, I'm Jim Tate. On this episode of the Tate Chronicles, I'm speaking with Samantha Taylor of Leidos. And so, Samantha, what differentiates, in your opinion, Leidos from other ONC testing and certification bodies?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So Leidos is a Fortune 500 company. We have about 47,000 employees worldwide, and we're a leader across defense, intel, civil, and health markets, supporting both commercial and government clients. And our health business alone boasts over $3 billion in annual revenue. And we achieve consistent client success and a track record of understanding results by combining our in-depth understanding of our clients' needs and our distinctive blend of technology, clinical expertise, and operational proficiencies. So one of the other really cool things about us is our HI team has a unique approach to creating our testing and certification processes for the ONC certification program. Our method is informed by our practical experience in health IT and clinical settings, kind of like I was talking about, with my experience to George's and Christina's. So that, coupled with our hand-on involvement with the previous labs and certification bodies that we've worked with, allows us to really look at what works and what doesn't work. And this practical experience equips us to be able to discern what strategies have been effective, which have not. And I really honestly believe one thing else that sets us apart, or is unique about our team is we have a really deep conviction across all of us that are on the team, and we really believe in what the products that our developers are building, because we genuinely think that they benefit you and I as patients every single day. So we're really proud of the work we do, the work that our developers do. And we also believe that, success may be defined differently by each of our developers based off their specific business needs. So no two developers come to the table with the same goal or the same reason for certification. And so our ability to uniquely understand what success looks like and move in an agile and flexible manner with them, I think also sets us apart. And we believe that partnering not only with EHR developers in their journey to achieve their certification goals, but also planning work on future endeavors with other testing and certification industry peers is really, really important. But ultimately, we believe that our success is only there if our developers are successful.
Well, and I appreciate you mentioned that the fact that, the implication that you meet developers where they are. In my work in certification, sometimes a vendor reaches out to me and they're pretty far along the road, and they just need maybe a little bit of hand holding, or but they're in pretty good shape. Other folks show up and they need a lot of help. So there's not one size fits all.
That is for sure.
At all of this. Last year, 2022, it seemed like the big lift for developers was G10, the Fire API. I know that required using the Inferno tool or something like the Inferno tool to mimic those smart on fire apps, and very complex testing. This year, the new thing that's required by the end of the year is B10, electronic health information export. And so I'm often asked, well, if we've got the certified Fire API G10, doesn't that cover B10? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've heard that comment before, and yeah, there's definitely been some confusion around B10, the electronic health information export criteria, as you said. But the requirement is pretty clear from the ONC's perspective, that it kind of just breaks it down to that if your product or your module stores any kind of EHI as is defined by ONC, or HIPAA type data, then the developer must not only expand their scope of certification to include that, but they also have to have that functionality to be able to export that either as a single patient or a group of patients, but they have to have that functionality rolled out by the end of the year. And I think that was one area that was very confusing. It wasn't just, we store it and we have to attest to it. No, I have to roll out functionality to be able to export that. And another source of confusion we've noticed is how the HIT product is actually put to use. So meaning, while a product has the capability to store the EHI, developers may face difficulties in determining how to implement it in compliance with the regulatory guidelines. And it's not just used within the context of storing patient data, it's about exporting that data. So it's definitely been an interesting conversation with our developers. The majority of our clients have had to implement this. But one of the most important pieces of advice that we can offer is just to, really take a deep dive into the ONC CCGs and their clarifications, because those clarifications on their website, the healthit.gov website, I think I mentioned that already, are related to questions that the ONC has received. So they've kind of pulled all that information together, provided it out there for the developers. And then also earlier this year, there was a developer roundtable call where Robert Anthony from the ONC did a deep dive into the explanations and clarifications related to B10. So we found that to be a really good source of information to help understand the different situations, whether it applies, whether it doesn't apply. And then, of course, for the developers, if they think that their situation is unique and maybe it doesn't apply to them, we always encourage people to reach out to their ACBs. And if they're not wanting to do that, they're always welcome to, of course, reach out to the ONC. They have a JIRA ticketing system available to them on the healthit.gov website as well.
And I know part of that requirement, and I know B10, unlike G10, B10 is attestation only, but there is real documentation that's publicly provided. that I guess is really for the provider's use as to the format that the data is in, and even I've looked at some of these online. Sometimes they even really give a good detailed explanation for providers of the workflow of how
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
export these. Yeah.
Yeah, they need some sort of data dictionary as well as an understanding or an explanation of how that export actually works. So those are the two things that folks are really needing to do to be able to meet this in a compliant way.
So we're getting near the end of 2023. So 2024, do
hmm
you see any significant new required functionality in next year or two that vendors perhaps need to be aware of in terms of uh, new certification requirements or
Yeah,
or,
I
or,
mean,
mod-
just
or modifications to existing requirements, I should add?
yeah, definitely. I think all of the above. I think, like many others, we're all eagerly anticipating the release of HTI-1. So predicting what exactly is going to come out of this new rule is very challenging. But one of the things that stands out most significantly to me with this new proposed rule is the naming convention. So for those that may not be aware, the ONC did release a new proposed rule in April of this year, and they proposed quite a few changes. And once the rule has been proposed, they open that up to the public. There's a 60-day comment period where folks like you and I and the software developers or whoever has a vested interest in this program can make public comments to that. That public comment period's closed, and so now the ONC is now working through all those comments and writing the actual rules. And we're anticipating to see that hopefully released into this year or very early next year. But one of the really interesting things that we noticed, like I said, was the naming convention has changed. And so over the history of the ONC program, we've had the 2011 edition, 2014 edition, 2015 edition final rules. And the ONC is proposing that we move away from that naming. So one of this new name is like I said, HTI-1, but what that stands for is Health Data Technology and Interoperability. So that's the one thing that they have proposed, and it'll be interesting to see how they actually roll that out and how it affects the existing criteria or potential new criteria. One of the other things that we have observed is the ONC's evolving approach to rulemaking, most notably back in June of 2020 when they released the 2015 edition Cures update. That marked the first instance where the ONC not only added and removed criteria, but it also modified existing criteria and also introduced varying compliance dates. So kind of like what we've been talking about with B10 and G10. So we anticipate seeing more of this in the future with HTI-1, and we anticipate advancements in the unique requirements as it relates to standards, particularly USCDI, or the United States Data for Core Interoperability. So currently, developers, if you come for testing, you have to minimally include USCDI version 1. The ONC is suggesting that they might move everybody to version 3, maybe version 4. And I find that interesting because obviously the program was rolled out in June of 2020 as voluntary, but we have not seen a huge influx of developers actually taking advantage of the standard version advancement process. So I think it's interesting how the ONC is now going to more than likely ask developers to update to version 3 or 4 and probably put a compliance date on that. We're predicting maybe the end of 2024, early 2025. But, until that rule comes out, we won't know for sure.
And hopefully we're hoping that the final rule comes out before the end of this year. Is that what you
Absolutely.
anticipate? Yeah.
That would be a nice holiday present.
and of course, the buzzword this year has been AI. And so, there's some aspects of certified technology, clinical decision support, for one. I think that's A9. That if AI is employed, there's going to be some real documentation required.
Yeah, I honestly believe that we're going to see a lot more rulemaking in a more frequent basis to be able to remain agile with the changing ecosystem of the healthcare market. Because just as soon as G10 came out with the API criteria, which is obviously backed by FHIR. We're monitoring that to see how that's going to change and how that's going to, evolve as AI becomes a more prevalent part of our lives. So between that and the clinical decision support, they're suggesting that we'll change the name of that to decision support interventions. So that new standards, AI, it's all going to be very, very interesting in the next, 24, 18 months, that time frame to see what happens with things.
Samantha, it's kind of hard to believe, but we're almost totally out of time. Before we say goodbye to our audience, how can our listeners find out more about the certification and testing services offered by Leidos?
Yeah, absolutely. Your listeners can go to our Leidos ONC Health IT testing and certification page on leidos.com, or they're more than welcome to reach out to us through email at leidos-hit-program@leidos.com.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Tate Chronicles, and I, of course, offer a special salute to my guest today, Samantha Taylor of Leidos. Samantha, thanks for coming aboard today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim. I really appreciate your time and your audience's time as well.
Thanks so much. You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. That's healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.